Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast 831. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camber. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly why I've asked you here. And all that hate, Mel?
Stop yelling at Todd.
Stop. All right. Hey, listen. Tonight we're going to cover Formula One news. And the news that we felt like covering, of course. But you know what that means? I have to introduce my co-host, and it's not a race weekend, so that means, well, you know what that means. I got to go all the way to the right coast of our nation, nestled in our nation's capital, also known as Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. You know her. You love her. It's the lovely, the redoubtable.
Grace!
Grace, how you doing?
You know, you should really talk to Paul about sending you all that hate mail. I think
know.
you got it. Bring it down a notch,
using
man.
a VPN, and he's got all these cute names he uses, and it's like, Paul, if you've got a beef with the podcast, just send me a text. But
yeah, right. Like, just
he's
bring
crafty.
Bring it up on the show. You'll be on again in 3 weeks. Just like save it all up, right?
Right. Yeah, all that pent up anger, he could just unload.
We'd enjoy that. That would be fun. Paul angry.
Well, he was last weekend. He had all. I mean, he had to get kind of snooty with the stewards there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's, Paul's like, what's his name? Banner, the Hulk. You won't like him when he's angry.
David Banner.
That's it.
Or Bruce Banner, depending on if you're talking about the show or the comic book.
Well, I was going to say Bruce Banner. Which one's that?
Bruce Banner was the original comic book, but for the TV show, he's David Banner because they thought Bruce was too effeminate of a name. So he's David Banner in the TV show.
G'day, Bruce.
That stuck with me because my brother's name is Bruce. So,
well, I think 50% of the male population in Australia is Bruce, isn't it?
I know, but you have siblings. Like you save those factoids to like dig that dagger in whenever you can. Like,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, Bruce, didn't you ever wonder why he's David Banner on the TV show? Maybe you should look that up sometime.
Look that up, Bruce.
I'm just putting that nugget out there for you. Yeah, they didn't. Yeah, they thought it wasn't strong enough. I don't think they used the word like it wasn't a strong enough. Like David,
strong.
David Banner, not Bruce Banner. But yeah, that's
like
why
Paul Charsley.
Right?
Yeah, got it.
Exactly. So, but yeah, it's that. I just thought that nugget was great when I found out, but I never knew why the TV show was David Banner in the comic books, which then
I didn't either because I always remembered as Bruce. Yeah. I guess that makes me old.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
you know what? I'm just going to put this out there. Don't judge. I was not a big comic book fan. I didn't read them as a child.
Yeah.
I didn't, I think because I was always outside riding motorcycles and all kinds of stuff. And I just didn't really get into comic book. Nothing against those that do. I totally get it. I get the appeal. It just, it was just, something I wasn't into.
Yeah. See, I married into the opposite when
because Flip's like big comic book guy.
To the point that when I started spending time here, I realized all his like bathroom towels were in his bedroom. And so I said to him, well, I mean, no, I don't care where you keep your towels, whatever, but most people keep them in the linen closet and you have a linen closet. So if all your bathroom towels are in your bedroom, what's in your linen closet? Comic books. That was the answer. Because it's like a little library, right? Like it made perfect sense.
On a mission.
Right. Yeah. So he just had like all his little comic books in the linen closet. And I was like, you don't have to get rid of I'm like, I don't want you to get rid of your comic books. I'm just saying that could we use a shelf for the bathroom towels? Because that's where you're going to look for them is in the hallway linen closet. And somebody's going to be darn surprised when they go, oh, I forgot to ask Grace for great.
Yeah.
X-Men #3, just what I was looking for, right? Like, no.
Try me off with X-Men #3.
Well, don't do that because I'm sure that's worth a lot of money now.
I'm sure it is.
So yeah, so he owns a lot of comic books, and I think it's why I've continued in the Marvel movie thing. I think I would have given up maybe a long time ago, but I enjoy watching like his facial expressions because like. We were talking about like with, Senna or the Marquez documentary, like, but they don't know. And so there's some joy in that. That's how he is. Watching movies, I can just watch his face. I'm like, ooh, something good's coming up. Or, ooh, I don't know why that, like they'll just stick some Easter egg in there. And I don't know why he got really excited about that, but I'll have to ask later. Right. So Yeah, comic books.
There you go.
They're a
Comic
big thing
books.
here.
There you go. I know what everyone's already saying.
Get to the show.
This is the show.
You have already learned about Bruce Banner and David Banner. So
yes,
the insightfulness has already happened on this show.
It's already begun. You just may not have known it because it's not F1 related, but insightful it is.
We got all kinds of topics here. We're not, you and I, we're not just like one thing, one trick ponies, right?
Yeah, don't get me started on how a direct view LED display works. I mean, we'll be here for the rest of the night.
I don't even know what that is, but all right.
Yeah.
So other than display, I have some idea what that is.
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy. All right, let's talk about some F1 news before everybody gets pissed off and starts yelling at me again.
Stop yelling at Todd.
Just Paul.
Right. Paul, I always wonder, Paul and I haven't asked Paul if he likes the preamble and to get to know us better because he already knows us and I don't think he wants to get to know us better.
I don't know that he wants to know anybody better though. It's not, I don't take it personal.
No.
It's just his way. It's fine.
Yeah.
Although
he was a mod, that's how he
I will say, I know you don't watch Top Chef, but
I do.
Oh, you do?
No, Next Level. I'm sorry.
You watch, which is its own thing. But no. But Top Chef this year, they're doing the All Stars, but they're doing it in London. And so they just did the episode in Kent. I was like, oh, Kent.
Awesome, Kent.
I know all about Kent. So
yes, all our Kentian friends out there.
That's right.
Yes, the astounding area of the British Isles known as Kent.
That's right. Paul Charsley's homeland. So I was like, whoa.
No, I haven't. Do you watch Next Level Chef?
I do. But I didn't realize there was a first season. I thought this was the first season, but
I did too.
No, it isn't. There was already a first season.
Yeah,
this is the second season. Yeah. So
but I was really upset to see Teeny. I know.
I love Teeny.
What was going on, man? With she was because she's been knocking it out of the park with Nori. Her and Nori have been doing awesome. So
hi, Kat.
Everybody's like, "What the heck are you talking about?"
Okay, but I will say that so now they don't have teams anymore. But for the longest time, so I love Teeny, right? I was a big supporter of hers, but she was on Richard Blaze's team. So now I'm making the Top Chef connection because I can't stand Richard Blaze. That's a lot of people feel that way. That's not just me, but it was because he was super annoying on Top Chef. And it was just like, I love Teeny. I hate Richard Blaze. I
don't know him well enough.
Yeah. And then he kept making like Blaze's basement kind of jokes. I'm like, now I don't like you even more. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
But yeah. I'm enjoying it. I kind of like it now that they're individuals because I like that Gordon Ramsay's like, I know we don't have teams anymore, but I still want my guys to win, right? Like he still is really competitive, even though that part's over.
Yeah. Now he's just down there driving them hard. You're like, come on.
What are you doing?
It's like, come on, Vince, you can do this. And I'm thinking, no, Vince can't do this.
He forgot the ground pork. I mean, that's a problem.
He was trying to make a Scotch egg, and that didn't work out without the ground pork. Sorry about that.
No, and why? Oh, Scotch eggs. I don't understand why that. I mean, I don't know why that's a thing. It's not a thing.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of Scotland, so that's my heritage. You go back far enough on my side, I'm Scottish. So where are all our Scottish listeners? If you are a true Scottish listener, reach out, send me a message, let us know you're out there. I know we have a lot of listeners in the UK, but not necessarily where. So if you're in Scotland and you listen, I'm Scottish by way back. I'm an American, but by way back is Scottish, right?
Right.
And if pressed, of course, I think the GOAT is Jim Clark, right? Mm-hmm. So where's the Scottish love? Come on.
Go ahead. You're not going to say it. If it's not Scottish, it's crap.
Yeah, if it's not Scottish, it's crap. Heed Dune.
It's like Sputnik.
Yeah, right. It's got a chemical in it, makes you crave it a fortnight. Okay, so let's talk about some Formula One news. There's some news.
I said, as I said before we went on air, we got 3 weeks of this, people. So
yeah,
it is like a mini summer break in the spring. I don't.
Thanks to China.
Formula One, this is not okay. I thought I had an error on my calendar. I was like, oh, I really have 3 weeks to fill.
3 weeks on, I know.
What are we going to talk about? So
I know that's a big gap, and you're kind of like,
no, it cannot be, Ricky.
Somebody's got to talk to Ricky. That's all I'm going to say. Somebody got to talk to Ricky about China and getting that race and getting this gap filled. But All right. So Formula One, the interesting conversation this whole past week has been on about the proposed rule changes about the sprint races. And remember, we're doing more sprint races this year. And now you remember this all sort of started very quietly and nonchalantly when Stefano Domenicali had mentioned, I'd be in favor of doing away with practices. We mentioned it a couple of podcasts ago. And you and I were like, no, not a good idea. Not a fan of that. But anyway, he said, he's fine with doing away with the practice sessions. And now there is a push for a second qualifying session in place of free practice 2. And that's being discussed. Now, having said that, now I wrote these notes early this morning. When I say early, it was like just after dawn, and then I've seen now stories that have come out on a couple of different outlets saying it's a done deal. At first they were thinking it wouldn't get done by Baku, but now they're saying it will.
They got like 7 weeks.
Yeah, right. You got a month. You know, make a phone call, have a Zoom call or something for crying out loud. So anyway, apparently they're going to add a special qualifying session to define the running order of the sprint race now. And they're going to use up one of the Friday practice or Saturday morning practice or whatever it is to do that. Now, this left Max Verstappen being quoted as saying in the media, in the news, that he was not a fan of them monkeying around with the F1 regulations at all. And if they keep changing things on the fly, he may lose interest in the sport. Now, that naturally had all the anti-Max fans applauding. Of course, they were, yay, leave, get out of here.
My comment to Flip may have been, I guess I have to like all of Stefano's changes now.
Yeah, right. So if you were, he's like, keep changing it until Max leaves. Yeah, if you were.
Right. Maybe that's my only hope. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Now, this all led to some beefy discussions around the interwebs about F1 favoring show over sport. And it's so let's talk about that because Grace, you'll track right along with me on this because you lived it.
I did.
Yeah. So if you are new-ish to the sport, you may not have been watching long enough to see this show versus engineering pendulum swing back and forth. But it does, and it has on many occasions in Formula One. And what I mean by that is they were saying it's more show than sport. And so it was getting the pendulum. They're suggesting the pendulum is risking moving towards entertainment more than the actual sport and regulations engineering. Now, back in 2013, the sport was accused, and by me included, of favoring engineering over entertainment and sport. And so this is back when the teams, when F1 decided to bankrupt 3 small teams and put others like Williams on life support in favor of hybrid engines because nobody could afford the damn things, right? So it was crazy back then, and kept thinking, oh my gosh, we're all in on this incredibly expensive technology around hybrid engines that nobody can afford except for manufacturers to build. And so this left the small teams trying to source those from manufacturers, and that was a mess. And then you had 3 teams that basically put them in bankruptcy, put Williams on life support, and this was right after those 3 teams joined the series on the promise that there was going to be a cost cap and that Formula One was going to be more affordable by then FIA President Max Mosley. These 3 teams come in and then promptly kicked right to the curb by this new hybrid technology. They couldn't afford it. So I argued at the time the pendulum was way too far to the engineering side because now you're literally kicked 3 Formula One teams off the grid. You put others on life support. This is not about the entertainment, Right. You've basically entered into an arms race and outspent all the other competitors.
Right.
Now the argument came up again when Braun GP, and you remember what Ross said.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
That's exactly right. There was a quote from Ross Braun last year or year before. He pretty much literally said exactly that Ferris Bueller line.
Yes.
So that's why
On his way to retirement. Yes.
Yeah, that's why I keep playing it. Now, back in Ross Braun era, they had the dual diffuser.
Yes.
Now, this was an incredibly ingenious engineering piece that completely upset the running order, and the FIA approved it. They said, it's within the regulations, when most of the teams said it is not within the regulations. But you see, the FIA liked it because it completely upended the running order. It's like reversing the grid, right? And the FIA liked that new entertainment value to the sport. They liked the idea of the underdog, Ross Braun GP.
I mean, right. It's the story of the lifetime, right?
Yeah,
like
it was. You remember that? We were like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, this is crazy. The only two teams that really showed up, if memory serves, there was two, maybe three, Williams and Braun, but Braun really had it nailed.
Right. That's why I often, Jensen Button's championship has an asterisk after it, right? Like,
yeah, that's why you've always said it's got an asterisk, because it was
really
artificially helped by the dual diffuser, which nobody was on top of.
Right. And so, it's not really a championship the way you're supposed to win one, but
Right. So you had that. So here's my point. The first one was in 2013, way too far on the engineering side. Braun GP era, it went pretty far on the show side. In 2004, Ferrari's domination of 5 seasons had led to talk of their engineering prowess, and the regulations were changed to hobble the team, as Alonso and Renault were gaining a lot of popularity at that time, and Fernando was the hot young gun, right?
Oh, yeah.
To dethrone Schumacher. Everybody wanted somebody to beat Schumacher, and Fernando was the guy. So they changed the regulations to hobble Ferrari. It was interesting at the time because your team boss over at McLaren, Ron Dennis, I know what you're thinking.
Nice, Ron.
Which is on your shirt. I know he said at the time, and this is when I first really started to gain a lot of appreciation for Ron and McLaren, because he said, no, wait a minute. It's not incumbent on the FIA to hobble our competition. It's incumbent upon us to engineer and come up with a car that beats Ferrari. And he felt like he was sort of being robbed that glory and opportunity to do so, right?
Right.
But nonetheless, they did. They hobbled him. Renault came in and took over. And then remember when Groove Tires entered the sport in the late 90s, and it was intended, now this is an interesting one, it was intended to spice up the show, but it turned into an engineering nightmare, with tire makers creating bespoke tires for specific cars, leaving everyone else running on a tire that wasn't bespoke to their chassis, right? So Bridgestone would make a tire for the Ferrari chassis, and everyone else that was running Bridgestones, good luck with that tire. Right. And then it really turned into an engineering a nightmare that they had to kind of dig their way out of, and then they went to sole source with Pirelli. But the point is, Grace, it is a fine balance between engineering and sports/entertainment. And this, this big change here, there are many who are arguing that it's already, the season started. Coming in during the season, making big regulation changes like this is artificially shoving the pendulum over to the show side instead of the sports side. How do you see it?
I mean, so I think as you were saying, right, I'm always against the idea of rules shouldn't be done to undermine the other teams, right? But unfortunately, I think that happens in a lot of sports, right? Like you're always trying to figure out, how do we hobble the Lakers or something, right? Like there's always some way that you're trying to make sure that all your teams are successful, and often it's done through rulemaking. Whether it's how draft picks, I guess because we're starting the basketball play-ins, teams will sandbag on purpose, right? So they get a better draft pick, because that's the only way you can get a leg up on the Lakers aren't that good this year. But anyway, a leg up on the Lakers. So you never really want rules that monkey with that kind of thing, because you want it to be for the good of the sport, not the good of the sport. Michael Schumacher wins too much, so we need to stop that, right? Like that's not really what you want in rules. You want them to be genuine and not just to push another team down. But I think that it is always hard to find that balance, and I think Formula One for sure struggles that, because Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsports, right? Like it is about the engineering. It is about the cars. I mean, I often make that complaint when they talk about, racing, and they just, we had a whole rant about how they just keep it on this like lowest common denominator level.
Yeah, right.
And it's because they're like, oh, people can't understand that stuff. But it's like, it's auto racing, and especially in Formula One, where it's more the cars than the drivers. I know that. That's fine. So you're going to have to tell me about the cars, because they're all supposed to be different. That's the idea. They're not all spec cars, right? So you're going to have to tell me about that, and it's okay. And so I think sometimes they shy away from that. But I don't know. I mean, I never liked this kind of artificial rule making. It never makes me happy as a fan. So
I'm with you, Grace. I'm not a fan of this at all. And it was interesting. Total Wolf actually commented on it. Here's a kind of a case where Total Wolf and Christian Horner are closer aligned than what they've certainly been in the past, right?
Well,
Christian is all in. He says it's absolutely ludicrous, right?
Right.
Now that's not quite what Toto said, and nor would he. He's not leading. If he was leading,
right,
and Lewis had won the first 3 races, he would very much be saying it's ludicrous.
right,
I guarantee it. But what Toto did say is, I think we all share the same objective, that we want the sport to continue to develop well and grow its audiences. We just need to find a common denominator, what the best principle is. I'm more on the conservative side. I like qualifying. I like the Grand Prix, the great prize. But we have to also be open-minded about where the sport is going to go. And some of the sprint races have been fantastic. So whatever Stefano decides is good. I think he will have all the data on the table, what is good for the audiences, what is good for the brand. And then we just want to maybe try and tweak things without using a baseball bat, but a Stanley knife, a more precise way to cut it.
Right. So I do think what's interesting is that at the start of the segment, I was like, "What are we going to do for 3 weeks?" I forgot that Stefano Domenicali's out there, so we'll have no problem filling 3 weeks. China, we didn't need you, right? I'm sure he'll have enough for us to be talking about for weeks here. But I mean, that's always the problem. I mean, I think it's the same way. I work for the federal government. People all the time are like, "Oh, you guys are too big." It is too big, but it requires a scaffold.
Scalpel, very close.
Thank you. Scaffold is something totally different, right? Yeah. And you can't just like, we don't need this agency anymore. Like, that's not how this is going to work, right? And so I think it's that same idea. It takes a lot to kind of get into that like tiny nuance, and not just like, right, like Toto was saying, like just take a baseball bat to all of it and scorched earth and start all over again. Well, that's not possible. So you're going to have to be small and delicate and careful about it. You can't just like, that's it, we're done with this rule altogether, or we're just completely changing everything. I think you want to see there's something to be learned about the sprint races. I think that you do want to keep improving them. It's what we all do in our jobs, right? You always have a postmortem, a lessons learned after everything, every round of whatever you're making, because you always want to try to make the process better. So if there's a way to make the sprint races better, right, that should be a planned part of your incremental process. But what you don't want is just Domenicali just throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? To see what sticks and what's interesting. And I just think he's just in that phase where it's like every idea that comes to his head, he just is like, what about this? What about this? What if we try this? Let's try this thing. What about that thing over there? Right. And it's just a lot of spaghetti, and I'm not sure what should or will stick, but I
mean, for me, just thinking, I'm just thinking out loud here, but I still have questions about the wear and tear on the engines, right?
Yeah.
The engine limits for the season. You're going to be running a lot more mileage in anger, damage during these sessions, fitting within the cost cap.
Yeah.
The increased race mileage parameters in a driver's current contract. So I don't know what all those drivers' contracts look like, but I'm pretty sure there probably is some language around that. Doing 2 qualifying sessions, 2 races, kind of an interesting addition to the amount of risk. It's one thing to be out in a practice session. it's a different thing to be in anger in a race with a bunch of, with 19 other first lap nutters.
Yeah,
right?
like we talked about with MotoGP, right? Like that totally changes the whole.
It does.
It's not every lap isn't the same, and you can't just be like, oh yeah, you're racing the same number of laps. It's fine. That's
right.
That's not it, right?
Because you and I talked about that with MotoGP. And I think it's a good parallel. With those guys, they're not in a cockpit on monocoque. These guys could easily high side and end their career on a sprint race.
Yeah.
And so, I'm just kind of curious about how all that plays in. What kind of concessions have they made to run that engine and that chassis in anger for, 20 laps or whatever it is, 20
Yeah, especially if you're Ferrari, right? Like you're already sweating bullets and we're only 3 races in, right?
Yeah, right. I'm thinking that qualifying, Charles is like, no! He's
exactly like, oh man, that's a lot. You want fewer laps if you're Ferrari, not more laps. What are we talking about here? Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, and so it led me to this sort of question about this whole let's do away with practice. Let's do another qualifying session. Let's just make it up as we go along during the season.
Let's just race. Why bother with any of this other stuff?
Yeah. Why? Yeah. Let's we got to keep the fans happy. Well, now wait a minute. What fans are we talking about here? What fans are we trying to keep happy here? Because I was perfectly happy and have been for decades with Formula One, and I'm not sure what we're trying to do here. So the question is are the new fans of F1 not happy with the product and therefore the sport needs to change immediately? I mean, who's driving this crap?
So again, I've used this example before. When I was a graduate student at University of Maryland, when it was convenient for the university, I was an employee. When it wasn't convenient for the university for me to employ, I was a student.
Yeah.
Right. So if there was money to be made, suddenly I was their employee. But then they're like, oh, no, you still have to pay the student fees because you're a student. Well, I thought I was an employee. Right. This is just a red herring. This is the reason why I use that example is they change with the wind, just like the University of Maryland does, to whatever fits their, whims. And to say it's for the fans, then it's hard to argue with that. Right.
Yeah, can't argue with that. It's what the fans want.
It's like, oh, I'm doing it for the kids. Do you hate children?
Right.
Right? Like, do you hate the fans? Or you
don't like the fans? You don't think we need fans? What?
Right. Yeah. So I think it's just an easy way for them, which I think is what you're getting at, right? It's just an easy answer to say, whatever I do is for the fans. And then you can't really argue with that.
I mean, we've both been around the horn once or twice. We understand change is inevitable, as they say. But is it change for change's sake? That's what I want to know. Or is this really needed as the F1 fan base is ripping robes and gnashing teeth over the tedium of F1?
They aren't. I don't think this is like the pitch clock in baseball. That's tedium.
Yeah.
And that needs to go away. Games need to be shorter. That's not what we're talking about here, right? I think I think that you go and you're just there all day and you watch all kinds of racing. I don't know somebody who's like, I wish there was less practice. I don't.
And the news articles, and it's interesting because the articles I read on this, some of the articles are from seasoned veteran F1 journalists, journalists that I respect a lot and have read for many years now. And, they're saying, hey, look, there's been a lot of concern already with Red Bull's domination. There's a lot of people unhappy to see after the dominant year they had last year. They just don't want to see that again. And so they really want to mix it up and want to do this sprint race and qualifying. And wait a minute, time out. The hell out here for a minute. Did you just miss the last 8 years of sheer domination by Mercedes, who beat the rest of the grid like a narc at a biker rally? Did you miss that? Did no one have an issue? I mean, I'm a Ferrari fan. Trust me, I didn't miss it. For 8 years, I sat there and watched Lewis and Valtteri kick the living crap out of everybody. I mean, they were a second and a half, 2 seconds dominant in 2014. I remember at Spa, they were 2 seconds ahead of everybody in 2014. I mean, did anyone miss that? Was anyone claiming at that time, we have got to change this up? We've got to bring in sprint races. We need to reverse the grids. We need to put sprinklers in. We have got to do away with the hybrids and bring back V8s mid-season. We got to do something. Nobody was complaining. Nobody was bitching. But now you have one dominant season by Red Bull, and people are apoplectic, ripping robes, and marching the keep with pitchforks and torches. I just find that bizarre.
Because it's not bizarre, and I this too, right? For it to be bizarre is to put an equal weight on each of the teams, and that's just not the case, right? It's a British Lewis Hamilton's there. He's a darling of the British media. He's a British driver. I don't know, he's a darling of the British media, but I think there is something to be said for the fact that Lewis does get treated differently than Max does. It's not an even weight. It's not like every team is approached by the media the same way. Not any different than it is in the NFL. People don't write about the Washington football team the same way they write about the Cowboys, the same way they write about, the Chiefs. Of course not. All those teams don't have equal weight to them. And so I think that's why you want good racing. And that's not necessarily the angles that the media is coming from. And so
it's a really good point. And you're probably, I agree with you. I think when you look at, that's probably why a team like Aston Martin, the British press probably kind of like that idea, right? They love the idea of Mercedes, a premium brand with Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champ, a premium British star, and then you get George Russell, who now is becoming quite the British charmer himself. And they love that. McLaren, of course they love McLaren. It's a British brand. You got Lando. Who doesn't love it, right? When Schumacher, Ferrari, they were pretty harsh on Ferrari and Schumacher era. They sort of started out liking Vettel, but after 4 years of domination, they hated him. They made him the bad guy.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, when Aston Martin, when he left Ferrari, all of a sudden they loved him again because he picked up trash. So it was, and he wasn't threatening. Yeah, and he wasn't threatening Lewis anymore, right? And so, yes, there is that element to it. I guess in the immortal words of the band The Fix, how much is enough, right? You like my Fix reference?
Nice.
I hung out with them. Super nice.
Really?
Jamie Westorm, one of the more underrated guitarists out there. I love Jamie. He couldn't have been a nicer guy. We talked guitars and everything. He was a super nice guy.
When did this happen? Was this
several years ago? Yeah.
Wow.
I was
That's really cool.
Yeah, I went backstage and went out to their tour bus, and they were, everybody having a Corona, and we were all sitting around, talking about the show and their gear and stuff, and they were super cool. Cy was a little more at arm's length because it's kind of him, and he's kind of the front guy, and he didn't know who we were, but Jamie and Rupert, and they just couldn't have been nicer. Anyway, so
this is a very informative show.
Yes, exactly. So a little shout out to The Fix.
Yeah, nice.
This smacks of sort of that knee-jerk F1 rampant pragmatism, and I'm certainly on record on this podcast. I'm not a fan of pragmatism. I favor prudence over pragmatism. I think it's important to measure twice, cut once, be prudent about the changes you're going to make. And to your point, Grace, I just want to see good racing across the board.
Right. I mean, I also think you don't want I guess to me, I'm not convinced that this is a good idea. And I guess that's part of it too, is that if he's just throwing out ideas, is this the spaghetti we want to stick with? I'm not sure we do, and I think the idea is when we're chasing our tails, right? And again, I think that's the worst place you can be as a rule-making body is just, because Dominicali is the CEO. That is what he's supposed to be doing, right? He's doing his job. He's out there drumming up support. He's out there like, we could be doing this and we could be doing that. And what about this? That's his job. But you don't always necessarily want that to trickle into, the rulemaking or the actual sport itself in that same kind of way. So I'm just concerned that people are just like, whatever Dominicali says, let's try that. Well, I don't really want that either.
Yeah, and there's an element of the teams, whether they approve of the changes or not in Formula One, dreaming them up. But the reality is the FIA has a say in this.
Yeah.
They're the regulatory body of the sport, And they were the ones, remember, when Eddie Everywhere, when they brought up adding more sprint races, he said, well, we might be able to be up for more sprint races if you pay us more money. And the sport was really mad about that. But he was like, no, wait a minute. I got to get these marshals. I got to get all these people staff for the qualifying or the other sprint race, more sprint races. I mean, this isn't, just hold a race and no marshal or no support. It's got to be adjudicated, and So, but apparently, I've read all these articles, but I haven't seen any quote from Eddie Everywhere or anyone from the FIA that they wholeheartedly support this idea. So we'll see, I guess.
No, and I mean, I think the solution is, what MotoGP does is you qualify, and that sets the grid for both the sprint and the race. You only qualify once.
Right.
The grid's the same. You don't have to qualify twice.
Right.
I mean, if you don't want the sprint race to affect your actual race, and just set the grid once. Like, there's other ways around this. You don't have to just.
Well, it is weird. I think and I could be wrong on this, folks. I read the articles pretty quick. It was early. That the Friday qualifying sets Sunday's race, and Saturday morning's qualifying sets a sprint race. But this is, I don't know.
I mean,
I understand. Look, let me be on the other side of the coin here. I understand more racing, more Formula One cars running in anger, more over the weekend, and I understand. I get that.
Yep. I think.
But
sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, but there's just a whole host of F1. Having watched them for decades now, F1 is notorious for making decisions that have knock-on effects that they did not take the time to anticipate. How the rules would be exploited, how the teams would exploit the regulations, and they just change it and they create a big old cock-up, and then they got to figure out how to undo it.
And they're surprised by it.
Yeah. This has happened too many times in Formula One.
Right. And I think, so what I was going to say is, we were talking about what fans. And I think the thing that makes Formula One different, even from other forms of motor racing or auto racing, is that most people never go to a Formula One race. Like, lots of people watch it and may only ever go to a handful of Formula One races across their entire lives. Right. It's just not a sport that you watch at the track. It's not like football. It's not like hockey or something like that, where you go and you can support your team.
I don't have season tickets. Yeah.
Right. Nobody does. And unless you work for a team or a broadcaster, who has season tickets to Formula One? Who lives that life? Right. So I think that's also always an interesting twist, but I agree with you. I just always feel like they're just like, it's the underwear gnomes from South Park, right? Like, we steal underwear, something happens, we make profit, and nobody figures out what that something is in the middle, and that's often where Formula One is. And then they end up in some spot and they're like, oh, did you think? Yeah, we thought this was going to happen, and we're just a podcast of, 3 people doing this for free, and we saw this coming. It's not like we are pretty smart, but we're not like super smart like that I'm like the Orphic Delphi Oracle, as you would say, right? And I like rub my magic ball. I'm crossing all kinds of things here. And I was like, whoa, this is what's going to happen. No, I have 2 brain cells. I've been watching the sport for some time. They bumped into each other. Of course, that's what was going to happen. And you're going to tell me you didn't think that was going to happen? Please learn how to plan.
Yeah, I'm a bit like Max, man. They start monkeying around with all the rules on the fly and exploiting their package this year, and trying to change the rules to get Red Bull to not be as dominant. I'm sorry, I'm going to be pretty pissed off at that. And I'm a Ferrari fan, but that's, I'm sorry. When Mercedes was dominating, I was very pointed in saying that Ross Brawn had the regulations written around the actual engine formula that they were already doing, the hybrid. So they had an engine performance baked in advantage, and I had all people, oh, you said baked in advantage. Yes, I am saying, because that's exactly what it was. And they had that for many years. But I wasn't complaining about it. They were just better at politicking and better at engineering a winning car. And more power to them. And that was fine.
That's the game.
That's the game. And I didn't bitch and moan and ask for, immediate regulation changes because I'm bored. I respected Mercedes' dominance. They were fabulous at doing it. Lewis was superlative, and that's great. If this is Red Bull's time, then I'm going to be happy about that for them, because they're doing it and doing it in a pretty astounding way. And they are a privateer. All right.
Yep.
So I am in respect and honor them, right? Of course, I want Ferrari to be the team dominating, but it's not happening, and I'm okay with that.
And it hasn't happened, but whatever.
Why not?
I think, we talked a couple weeks ago about how Formula One is the opposite of any given Sunday. Stop trying to make Formula One any given Sunday. That's what they're trying to do. It's never going to be that. It's not even any given year. It's just the way of the sport. Let it be.
Yes.
Let it be its authentic self. And you're right. Sometimes teams get a leg up because they're better at politicking. They're better at playing the game.
Yes.
They're, and that's part of it. That's part of the circus. That's part of the intrigue. That's part of what makes it interesting. So dig into that, but don't stop trying to make it like any week now Williams is going to win. They're not. That's just the way it is this year. So
I mean, I do apologize that the real Formula One didn't quite turn out as entertaining, as exciting as Drive to Survive. And
nothing will.
I apologize, but nothing's going to, because that has creative license. It did what it did. And it's a fine series, and I enjoy it for what it is, but that's not what Formula One's like in aggregate, in total. Dominations happen. Teams ebb and flow. Money ebbs and flow. Prize money ebbs and flow. It's to be a Formula One fan is the long game, and you got to let the game come to you, because it evolves like that.
Watching Drive to Survive and expecting that to be what Formula One is like getting all your relationship advice from a soap opera.
Yeah.
I love me some General Hospital, but I don't think that's what my marriage is like. It's TV. It's General Hospital. Right. It's not real, right?
Right.
So, I just don't think that you could. I enjoy Drive to Survive now that it's been around long enough that people know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people don't treat it like, oh my God, because we joke about that all the time. I was in that race. Were you in that race? Like, now it's not even surprising anymore. Like, that was actually some anorak, right? That was actually from this race over here in 2003 when so-and-so said that. Yeah, we know, right? Like, I mean, it's important. That needs to be out there so people know, but it's not real.
Right.
It's not real. I just always think of George from last year when they asked him about it. And he was just like, these are real people to me.
Right.
I don't have a choice. I have to live with this. I have to live with these guys. I also think I could never be the boom mic guy. I would totally be like, boop, boop. What was that Christian order? Boop. I would every time. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Boop. I just don't know how as a boom mic guy. That just seems like the most tempting thing to do to anybody. What was that, Toto? Boop.
You're like, I have an Australian Shepherd, I have two of them, which are herding dogs, and the older one, the black tri, he's a big boy, and and so they're herding. They're drivers, actually, not herders like
a Corey.
Border Collies. Border Collies herd and gather. The Australian Shepherds drive, and so part of that is they nip at the heels and they nose bump constantly, right? And so they call it booping in Australian Shepherd. So my Australian Shepherd, very much, if he was the camera or the microphone boom guy, constantly booping everybody, because he's always up booping my leg.
Yes.
What's funny about it is, boy, if you kind of boop his nose back, boy, he goes nuclear. He hates it.
Yeah. Bet I told this story, but my friend's corgi, because corgis are also hoarder dogs, herder dogs, and had to have surgery. So it had the cone of shame.
Yeah, sure.
And of course, he hated the cone of shame until he figured out it actually works as a scoop to get more food in his face. He loved that, and then it was really an effective herding technique, because that hurts, right?
Awesome.
Like his little nose. You're like, oh, that's so cute, your little nose. But when he rams that whole piece of plastic, you're like, dog, fine, I'm moving, right? He loved the cone of shame when you realize that.
Both my dogs, I have the oldest one is a male, the little younger one is a female, and they both, had, they were both fixed, and so they both went through their period with the cone of shame, and oh my gosh, the male, he's so big already, and he just, he'd tear through the house and take out half the furniture, and if you happen to be standing there, he'd clip you at the knee, it was just like, whoa. Yeah. So I was elated when I could finally take that thing off.
Yes, right. I think the other story I have is, so we're getting our basement remodeled, and so we're picking paint colors. And so anybody that's ever had to paint a room or fix
papaya.
So we talked about like a papaya and a blue, right?
Yeah.
So, but we didn't. We went with like it's chai tea and a bronze kiss, I think is what it is. But anyway, so I'm at work. Flip is at Home Depot, and he's just sending me pictures, right? Like, well, here's what our flooring looks like. What do you think about this color square next to this? And he goes, what? And so then he starts getting crazy, and he goes, what do you think about a Braun GP themed basement? I don't need the color swatches to know. I don't want that. Who wants highlighter green and black and white in their basement? I don't. Yeah. So this is where my life is not like General Hospital, because I was just like, how much are you really wed to that color scheme? He's like, that's the nicest way you've ever told me. No way, ever.
I wouldn't do Braun. No.
I was just like, are you really sure? How much do you really want that color scheme? Because
tell him you wanted the last color that Ron Dennis selected in the naming. He called the last McLaren, if memory serves correct, Predator Gray.
Oh my gosh,
that was his term.
That's great, Predator Gray. That is Predator very Ron
Gray.
Dennis.
It is very Ron Dennis, isn't it?
Predator Gray.
It was a good looking car, but yeah, Predator Gray.
Yes. Or we could go with the silver of fingerprint hell, like that. Just you look at it, and your fingerprint starts showing up on it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Let's talk about Lewis Hamilton's contract. I think that's good. So Lewis Hamilton's contract's up at the end of this season, and it's yet to be extended. But Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff says there is no plan B if Lewis decides to stop. He said, quote, I think it may sound naive, you think, but I really struggle to think of a plan B if my plan A is still the one that is my favorite. I don't want to engage in discussions with other drivers because I'm happy with the ones that are in the team, and that's for sure. At the moment, there is no plan B. It's Lewis.
Except this kid right here that's always in every shot now over my shoulder. That kid that we got from Haas. Yeah. Maybe he's my plan B. I don't know. He just seems to be here a lot. I don't know.
We still got the red helmets in the back he could wear.
That's right. This guy right here.
That guy. It's an interesting issue, and I think it's honestly, and you and I, we see quotes like this, and we know they're media platitudes.
I love it, though.
No team the size of Mercedes has zero planning around filling a seat if Lewis leaves. Trust me. You talk about not being prudent. Good heavens.
Yes.
That would be a galactic mistake to not be thinking about plan B long term. In fact, as I've said for the past year or two, I would already be parting companies with Lewis in favor of luring Lando, Charles, or another Mercedes-supported driver to work with George, because I think George is doing fantastic. The reason I think Lewis is too expensive for the long-term gain, given George's immense pace that he's had so far. And I think you start looking down the road. So, no, I wouldn't pony up with Lewis for another $40 million. No, I wouldn't do it.
I think you roll into the negotiations. Lewis comes into the room. You're on the phone as Toto. And, 1 minute. Oh, okay. Yeah, that was Mick. I'm sorry. What did you need, Lewis? Yeah. What did you want to talk about? I just had to take that call.
We're trying to get Mick's seat fitting. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everything was okay with the kid. Right. Plan B.
Yeah. So you're thinking you're an idiot. He's a sometimes. Yeah, I know he is. But I'm telling you, you have to think long term with these teams, and 2026 will be here before you know it. You got to get George, and George has been more than an ample replacement. He beat Lewis last year, and he's out-qualified him this year. So George is thereabouts when you give him the car. So I think, and to be really frank with you, George is having less of those unforced errors than Charles Leclerc is, folks. So you got to reckon that. And I think it's nothing personal. It's just a simple cost-benefit analysis from a business perspective, and a team has to think about life after Lewis. And it would be better to be the architect of that future than the victim like they were when they scrambled to find Valtteri after Nico surprised them with his surprise retirement, right? And it left Toto on his heels trying to say, we'll take that guy. We'll take that Bottas guy,
The guy with the mullet, we like him.
Yeah, we like him, So, better to be the architect of your future than the victim of it, right? That
is the life goal.
It is the life goal, yeah. So I don't believe a word of it, Toto. I appreciate what you're saying.
But I love it. It's so, Yeah, it's great.
It's
It's
so
so
Pollyanna,
nice,
isn't it? It's
right?
just,
Like,
"Yeah,
oh, I don't
have a
know.
plan. I don't have a plan B. It's Lewis. I like Lewis.
Yeah, right.
I know you do. Come on, man, get real. You're a team boss.
Stoffel Van Dorn. You know what I mean? Like,
Stuff of Andor. In a world where nothing is as it seems.
I mean, there's so many options. So I mean,
So many.
take Nico Hulkenberg back. I don't know. There's just
Hulk.
options. So of course
Isn't
they do.
Jerome D'Ambrosio hanging around the garage lately
Oh,
too?
yeah. See,
Yeah.
I think that's what I would do. I would just be like, oh, I wanted to introduce you to this new Mercedes young driver, so and so. And then next week, oh yeah, have you met that guy? He's really good. You should watch him in Formula 2, right? Like I would just be dropping those hints everywhere I
Yeah.
could. Yeah.
I know. Let's see. Hey, back in the news, Red Bull's penalty. You remember that penalty? Remember Red Bull was determined to have overspent by $2.2 million over their $145 million cost limit in 2021. And back in October, they were handed a $7 million fine and a 10% reduction in wind tunnel time for a 12-month period, or also known as a year. So apparently, Fred Vasseur reckons that this was a light penalty given the team's domination so far. Fred said this, quote, "I'm still convinced the penalty was very light. If you consider we will improve the car's performance by a bit less than 1 second over the season in terms of aero, and you get a penalty of 10% of this, it's 1/10. It is equivalent to the loss of 0.1 seconds. As it's not a linear progression, it is probably less. And as you are allowed to spend this money somewhere else on weight saving and so on, for me, the penalty is marginal." So, it's not to be biased here as a Ferrari fan. Look, he's got a point. I understand his point. From his perspective, I get it, which I would assume is a learned perspective because Fred's been around this sport a while.
For sure. Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, he kind of knows what he's talking. He say, look, teams effectively gain about a second in development over the year, and the bottom line is it's 10% of that, it's a tenth. Is that really harsh enough, right? I suspect, though, Red Bull would certainly deny that math. And much of this year's car was designed last year with no increased limits on wind tunnel time. So Red Bull might, and I think Red Bull would say, this year's car was designed last year when we didn't have those limitations, and that this year is the year those penalties will bear fruit with wind tunnel for the 2024 car and any in-season development we do of the 2023 car. So it will impact us. But I guess the big question is, Grace, yeah, it probably will, but have they got so much performance that the penalty or reduce wind tunnel time will present largely sort of
Right.
being negated, right?
Right. When you're already like 10 and now you're at 9.5, but everybody else is at 4. Does it
Right.
matter? Right.
Does it matter? Yeah, I guess that's the argument. But, that's hindsight. That's the beauty of hindsight. No one knew that they would have this kind of pace this year. So
I also always like that. We give it a couple years. I'm going to be positive about Ferrari. We'll give it a couple years. And this seems marginal until it's Fred Vasseur that's the person that's receiving the penalty. And then suddenly it's going to be like, talk about gnashing the teeth, not because he's at Ferrari, but just any team boss, although Ferrari's very good at the gnashing of the teeth.
yes, they are.
But then it'll be like, oh my God, how dare you? It'll be like the cat singing the song of their people first thing in the morning because I didn't get up at 5:30. I got up at 5:32 and I didn't feed them fast enough, right? Like, yeah, so it's all marginal until it's you.
Yeah.
So some of that is always true as well. Somebody has to this is not right. And so it's Fred.
Yeah, but if it was happening to Ferrari, it'd be...
No, it cannot be, Ricky.
I mean, Ricky would have to put a stop to it.
That's right.
Ricky is my new guy that solves everything.
Somebody at that team, I mean, Australia, somebody has to be. Carlos Sainz, I don't know. That's still so yeah, I don't know. It's a good thing. It's a good thing I didn't watch that race at 2 a.m. because I would never have slept again.
Yeah.
Like when I watch it live, I like to take a little nap, wake up at like 1:00, whatever time the pre-race is on, watch it, and then go to bed. Because usually, it's a Formula One race. You can kind of watch it and then go to bed. Australia would not have happened. I would have just been like pacing around my house at 4 a.m, like, what is this sport? What's wrong with you people?
Mm-hmm. I know.
It's not okay.
Let's see. In other news, hey, let's talk about this. I thought this one was pretty funny. Felipe Massa now making some noise in the press that he may be eyeballing his legal options. Look, Bernie Ecclestone, former owner of Formula One, Bernie Ecclestone told a website, he said, "We decided not to do anything for now. We wanted to protect the sport and save it from a huge scandal." This talking about the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix, which Renault was determined to have purposely, Nelson Piquet Jr. ordered Nelson Piquet Jr. to crash, purposely leaving Fernando, who had just pitted, in the lead and to take the win. And this prompted Felipe to make another stop in which he dragged half the fueling rig down down the pit lane, and it turned into an episode of Keystone Cops. So he said, after all these years, which Felipe Massa missed the world championship by 1 point, and had this race, he said Ecclestone said they were trying to save it from a huge scandal. That's why I used angelic tongues to persuade my former driver, Nelson Piquet, to keep calm for the time being. Back then, there was a rule that a world championship classification after the FIA award ceremony at the end of the year was untouchable. So Hamilton was presented with the trophy and everything was fine. We had enough information and time to investigate the matter. According to the statutes, we should have canceled the race in Singapore under these conditions. That means it would never have happened for the championship standings, and then Felipe Massa would have become world champion and not Lewis Hamilton. Zing! Zing! I mean, so they, quickly, everybody called up Felipe and said, "Yeah, right about that, right?" And he was like, "Well, there's a rule that says when there's a championship is decided from the moment the driver receives the championship trophy, things can no longer be changed, even if they've proven a theft." At the time, Ferrari's lawyers told me about this rule. We went to other lawyers, and the answer was nothing could be done. So I logically believed in the situation. But after 15 years, we hear that the former owner of the category says he found out in 2008, together with the president of the FIA, they did nothing to not tarnish the name of F1. This is very sad to know the result of this race was supposed to be canceled, and I would have had the title. In the end, I was the one who lost the most with this result. So we're going after it to understand all of this. So he's chatting with lawyers about the whole thing. I would have to think there's a slim chance to do anything. Here in the States, we have statute of limitations. I would think. A lot of this is going to depend. I'm not a legal scholar. A lot of this is going to depend on the country of any possible case to be heard.
But this is what kind of. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're Felipe Massa, Felipe baby, you pissed. Push it, right? Like that mad. Part, absolutely, right? For sure, you're mad. That I understand. But if they're not going to go back and review Abu Dhabi 21, they're not going to go back and review Singapore 2008, sir. Yeah. Like, that's not going to happen. So I just think, and based on something Bernie Ecclestone said, I mean, that guy's like, I don't know. Bernie just says things. It's not even
He's a nonagenarian now.
He's old as, I don't know.
He used to be an octogenarian. Now he's a nonagenarian.
And he's still dating a millennial or married to a millennial. It's great.
Is. I mean, how crazy is that?
So I
agree with you, because if Mercedes and Lewis has to just deal with it on Abu Dhabi, I'm thinking Felipe is just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, but Bernie says, regardless of his age, he just says things to like stir the pot. I'm not saying he says things like an uncontrolled crazy person. No, he's very calculated when he says, but if he can stir the pot a little bit, that's what he's going to do. And he's going to say something that still kind of like stirs the pot. Like we talk about Drive to Survive is a different version of history. Bernie has his own little way of portraying history that is like, I mean, we started, was it on Netflix, that Bernie Ecclestone? Oh, maybe I watched it on YouTube. I don't know. Bernie Ecclestone documentary. That's him that he did. And it was just like, I watched like 5 minutes of that. I'm like, we watched 2 different Formula Ones, Bernie Ecclestone. What are you talking about? Like, maybe people now are like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Get the hell out of here, man.
Yeah.
We watched 2 different series, sir.
Funny. Poor Bernie.
So I don't know, but poor Felipe, like let the poor guy live,
You know, and what dignity he handled that whole situation.
Yeah, and then and I think
he's a great guy.
I think between that and like his like farewell at Brazil, and then just kidding, it wasn't a farewell. It was just like I don't just let him be. Don't give him a microphone, but just let him be.
I met Felipe a couple times, and
he's a nice guy.
sweet guy.
Yeah.
Sweet guy. Yeah,
for sure.
Let's do some Alvin's Cats. Why not?
Get down.
Yes. Let's see. I don't have any Alvin's Cats. Do you?
I do. So I do. First of all, I'd like to recognize that I didn't realize that Polo also had a BWT sponsorship going on there, but I'm liking your snazzy Polo shirt. Look at that.
Yeah, look at that. I know.
Who knew that Ralph Lauren and, BWT were a thing?
If you're new to the podcast, all winter was flannel shirts, and then all summer will be polo shirts. Yeah.
Yes.
Ralph Lauren in particular, yes. So get used to it.
Yeah, right. But, I always like to, it's always a nice conversation piece. It is. Which Ralph Lauren shirt will you be wearing this week?
I was wearing a new one that I got not too long ago just for you. It's black with a papaya large horse, and on the back it says McLaren and the number 4.
Wow.
The McLaren shirt. Yeah.
I'm pretty impressed. Look at that.
I know.
I feel honored.
Uh-huh.
I'm not wearing a red Ferrari shirt for you, so that's only going to be a one-way.
No, I know you won't. But that's okay. You got your nice Ron shirt on.
Nice, Ron.
I do, right?
Yeah.
It's throwback. It's a classic.
It is throwback, yeah.
The old show.
Yeah.
So then I did want to also ask you, so have you watched the Marc Marquez documentary yet?
I haven't, and I keep, I'm trying to find some time. I desperately want to watch it. It's not like I don't. I'm just trying to find time.
I know. It's a story of my life.
I can't wait, though. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it.
The first 3 episodes are really good. The last 2 I felt were a little rushed, but
yeah. Come
on, man. You can find 3 hours.
I know.
I never can. What am I? You know what I mean? I have no space to I'm always cramming. That's why people are like, you didn't watch whatever. Like, to me, there's some part of this is just more racing. I have to watch Formula One. I don't have time for you to have sprint races every week. Don't you know what MotoGP is crushing my style? I don't have time for this. And
it's a lot of content.
And hopefully so we just had our second MotoGP race in Argentina, and only Joan Mir was the only rider we lost this week. So hopefully we've maybe figured this out, because I really do like the sprint races. I do think they're fun. I mean,
how
they're
about
definitely
that KTM in the sprint race?
I know. I mean, I think it's great, but I just want people to stay on the bikes. It's really hard for me to get rid of that cognitive dissonance of 3 to 4 riders fall out in the sprint race and really hurt themselves. And I don't know. It's hard to really like that, but I do like the idea of Jorge Martin doing well, because it's fewer laps for him to fall over, or Pecco Bagnaia at this point. That was crushing.
That was crushing. That was harsh.
Yeah, it was harsh, but great for Fabio. So
yeah.
But Pecco, we were hoping hoping that your ways of falling off were behind us. We were wrong. So, but it's
it's great for Valley's team, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's super.
Yeah. So
good stuff.
Yeah, Baz won, and I think you're just going to keep seeing good things. And I think the same thing for Alex Marquez. I think you're going to keep seeing.
I thought he had a really good weekend.
Yeah.
And not the best bike, but a great weekend though.
And old man Joanne Zarco, who I think looks like he's 70 and yet is younger than I am, and I don't know how that's happened, but Joanne Zarco, the actual rainmaster.
At this point, I think his issue is he needs to finally put a shirt on.
He never does though.
I know.
That'll never happen.
Sure, be good for him.
He's like George Russell.
He is.
They should be friends. Come to think of it,
they should be friends, and they could do a whole marketing campaign around George and Fabio Quartararo with no shirts on. It'd be perfect.
Right, just like how Ducati and Ferrari used to do Zoom together, right? They could have a whole, they could do a Fruit of a Loom campaign or something. That'd be great.
Yeah, stand around in tidy whities. That'd be perfect.
That's fine.
Let's see. Are you ready for some no shit headlines?
Yeah, sure. I'm ready.
This one's good. Miami GP unveils Sunset Cabana package, costing a staggering $67,000 with real water this time. Not the fake boats and fake
Here's
water.
your water.
You get real water with your 70 grand.
What?
I'm not familiar with this sport any longer. I'm not familiar with it.
I don't know. I have no idea what's going on in Miami.
I 1 year, thanks to Shell, it was in the Paddock Club, and I think the Friday was $5,000, Saturday was $5 or $6,000, and Sunday was like 10 grand. So you're like 20 grand in, and it's the Paddock Club. It's Ferrari's Paddock Club.
Yeah.
Right. And I went to this, and all the people there were, this is cliente and, sponsors and big high profile customers. And they're all well-heeled.
It's
people.
Nobody wearing nice Ron t-shirts,
No,
right?
No. I looked like the rum dum in there, and I was wearing a sport coat. But so I'm in there. But then they figure out, that I actually know what the hell's going on track. So then it ends up I'm sitting there with a whole mass of people all huddled around me. Why are they doing that? What are they doing this? Oh, well, why would we do this? And I'm trying to explain it. And at some point I'm trying to watch the race. And so anyway.
It's like having a bunch of
grand.
It's like having a bunch of 5-year-olds, right?
What
about this? What about this? What about this? Well, if you shut up for 5 seconds,
why do they do that? Yeah, just watch it. It'll unfold. But 70 grand? I mean, the Paddock Club was really nice, but I can't imagine sitting out in the Sunset Cabana for 70 grand with, quote, real water. Okay.
What is that? Where are you getting real water? You're not at the racetrack. That's where you are, right? You're actually in Miami.
You realize you're in the Miami Dolphins parking lot.
Right. Through the stadium. Where do you think this race is happening?
I'm telling you, I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Go to Austin, buy a general admission ticket for the weekend, and go sit on a grassy knoll next to the grandstands anywhere between turns 6 and 10.
All right. If you want water, go to Canada.
Go to Canada. That's right. Ile de Notre Dame.
There's plenty of water there.
Plenty of water. The St. Lawrence River, right?
St. Lawrence River. It's lovely.
There you go. You know what your water. Here's the next no shit headline. This one's a good one. Charles Leclerc pleads with fans to stop gathering outside his home after leak of his home address.
So I want to know. I'm going to say I want to know where he lives. I don't actually want to know where he lives, but clearly there are a lot of Formula One drivers, et cetera, that live in Monaco.
Yeah, right.
Does he not live in a gated community? Is that the problem? Like, he's not living where Lewis lives or where Nico lives.
Right.
Where are you living, Charles Leclerc, that people can get to your home this easily?
Well, it's crazy. Leave him alone for crying out loud.
Well, I mean, I agree with that too, right?
That's ridiculous.
Of course.
So where Charles lives, so we're just going to hang out inside, next to his condo building and wait for him to come in and out. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I mean, it's like a lot of celebrities, right? Like if I'm eating dinner with my family, it's me and my family.
Yeah.
Give me space. Please don't come up to me, right? Like, that's fine. Be normal humans, right? They're just humans too. But I just thought that was not that it was weird, but just that like there are lots of famous people. It's like walking around LA. At some point you don't go, oh my God, is that so-and-so? Yeah, they are all over the place. It's LA. It's like pointing out politicians in DC, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's so-and-so. Calm yourself. They'll be there tomorrow too, right? Like it just is a thing, I don't know. It's Monaco. There are a lot of famous people that live there. There's a lot of famous Formula One people that live there. Leave them alone. Let him leave his...
Charles, I'm going to tell you the solution right now. You, under an anonymous account, you somehow leak Lewis Hamilton's address, and then all of them will go over to Lewis's house and leave you alone.
They must know where Lewis lives. That's what I'm saying is that I can't imagine that in a town of like 100 people. I don't know. Like Monaco never is presented as being that big of a place. I'm sure it's bigger than that for sure. But, I'm sure people know where Lewis Hamilton lives. I'm sure people know where Nico Rosberg lives. I'm sure there's a tour bus that drives past them. It's like you're in Hollywood.
There is in Hollywood.
Right. So, I mean, it's unfortunate. It probably is because, he still lives in his neighborhood.
But it's a little different. The Hollywood Star Tour is like, and the house on the left is where Jan Michael Vincent lives. You might remember him from Airwolf.
I don't know.
Okay, keep going. This is Charles effing Leclerc.
I'm just saying there's a lot of other,
Yeah, no, I agree. Go
So
hassle someone else.
You just maybe can't live in your part of Monaco anymore. You're famous.
Gonna have to move.
To the other part of Monaco where the other drivers live, because
the other side of the tracks.
People know where you
community.
live. Yeah.
Stop slumming it, Charles.
Well, I mean, that's always what he said, is that people are always like, oh, you live in Monaco. He's like, well, Monaco's not all like that,
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, it isn't all like that. So, but you may not be able to live in that part anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
Unfortunately. But yeah, people do need to, I don't know.
Leave him alone.
I've definitely been starstruck by people I've met, and you're just kind of, I just have no words. I just am like, right? Like I can't, nothing comes out, and it takes a while before your brain kind of kicks into they're just people, right? Whatever that idol is of yours, they're people, you're people. It's fine. I'm people.
I'm not one of those guys. For whatever reason, I've hung out with the Who, Peter Frampton, Ringo Starr, Joe Walsh, all of the Eagles. I just treat them like dudes. Because to me, it's what they are. I mean, I'm not. Yes, I have immense respect for them and what they've achieved. Of course, I do. And, I could wax poetic and spend the whole night offering platitudes. But to be honest with you, that isn't what they want to hear. And I'm not interested.
No,
I'm interested in having, they're real humans,
Yeah, that's what
Just
I'm
talk
saying.
to 'em.
Yeah, so it takes a bit, and you just kind of keep, I think it's similar to like, we do this thing. Sometimes I say things and I think, oh, I shouldn't, that didn't come out the way I wanted it to. But you just have to keep going. Like you can't dwell on that thought, or playing sports, right? Like if you miss the shot at that end, you don't have time to dwell on that. You have to
you gotta
go to the other end, right?
Yeah,
So it's the same idea. You kind of have to work through that, like, oh my God, it's Peter Townsend. Oh my God. So, sir, how's it going? Right? Like, it's like the duck underwater, but you're very calm on top of the water, right? So you just try to like hold that in and because they're just people, and it'll pass. This too will pass. People. And they're just pretty cool people. Right. So you hung out with all of the Eagles?
I did. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. It was really cool. Mm-hmm.
It sounds really cool.
Yeah. Joe was great. And Timothy B. Schmidt was nice. They were, and Don Felder was a sweet guy. And Joe, how you doing, Joe? What? How you doing?
How you doing?
Where are you living now, Joe? Oh, wherever I wake up.
That hasn't changed.
Guy. Yeah,
that's great.
He was hilarious. But
I like that. It's not an act, right? That's
no. That's how he is. He's just totally laid back like that. Yeah,
that's great.
And Pete and the Ox. This is before the Ox passed away tragically into us a little bit. Really nice guy. Pete is, again, a little bit like Cy. He's a little more at arm's length because he's had a lot of weirdos come up to him in his lifetime, being sort of the
the front guy.
Yeah, the front guy and all that. But Roger Daltrey, incredibly sweat guy. Incredibly sweet. He couldn't have been nicer. And he said, well, my wife's here. She's going to be watching at the front of house, the console, so you can sit with her. So I sat with his wife, who is equally charming and wonderful, wonderful people. So really like them. They were so cool, down to earth.
I'm going to share my favorite Roger Daltrey story, which was I once saw him on Conan O'Brien. This was, like 10 years ago or whatever. And he was in a play. I think he was in A Christmas Story in New York City, right, on Broadway. And he was talking about how he has to stay in these really terrible motels because he's Roger Daltrey and they all have banned him. And so he's like, but I'm an old man now. He's like, I'm 70 and I'm staying in like the Motel 6 in like Newark because it's the only place I can get a hotel room, even though I'm like, but I'm on Broadway, Ritz-Carlton. They don't care. They know who you are. And a lifetime ban meant a lifetime ban, sir.
Isn't that great?
I just love that. Like, oh, but that was 20-year-old me, and it was all Mooney, right? Like what?
It was Mooney for sure.
Right. So I didn't do those things. Why am I the one getting in trouble? But I just love that idea that he's just like this nice old guy now that has to still stay at a crappy motel because he's been banned from everywhere.
That's funny. He was great.
That's great.
Let's
Ooh,
see.
look at
Other no shit headlines. This is Johnny Herbert blindsided by Sky Sports F1 axing and still in the dark over the situation. I think that's a really weird situation.
It is. Why would you do that to him? I mean, especially because isn't the reason has to be something like we don't have enough money, or we have too many drivers, or you're too old now, or something. Like, just tell him. I mean, that's terrible to leave somebody hanging like that, and especially because I thought he did a really great job. I really like Johnny Herbert is kind of the like, he's a good bridge guy, right? Like he's good at like taking what you're saying over here, Damon Hill, and working it into what Simon's gonna say over here. Or like plugging in the whole. I just think that he's like a Bob Varsha. Like he has that like nimbleness to kind of move between topics.
He does. And he's another guy I met in the paddock in Austin, and he was standing there. He just finished conversation. I don't remember who he was talking to. That'll probably come to me. But anyway, he had just finished and turned around, and I was walking right up by him, and I said, "Mr. Herbert, how are you?" And I shook his hand. And he goes, "Fine, fine." I said, "You don't know me. I write for a blog and stuff, but and do a podcast." And he goes, "Oh, that's great." And I said, "Hey, just want to tell you though, I'm a big fan from Benetton days. Really enjoy your work on Sky and what you do, and just keep up the really good work, And we sat and chat for I don't know about 5 minutes, but. Again, just a really sweet guy. Really nice guy.
Seems very genuine.
He is, very much so. And it's a shame what happened. And then finally, my final no-shit headline is Max Verstappen's stunning girlfriend, Kelly Piquet, warns F1 ace not to get fat as a pudding sandwich.
Okay, so first on the Johnny Herbert story, there was a brief period where I did hate him because Autosport back in the day when you used to have the like ads would be around whatever the content was, and he was like the spokesperson for Castro Motor Oil, and it was like green and flashing. So I'm sure if you go back to like the podcast from like 2007 or so, there was a lot of hate that I had, but it was really about those advertisements that you could not get away from on Autosport's website. Right. That was just like Johnny Herbert's face showing up everywhere, and I'm like, I just want to read this story.
I remember this.
It was terrible, but that's the only beef I got about him. Right. The second story, I don't know, like a pudding sandwich. First of all, is that like a British?
Is that a thing? I don't know what that is. Anyone, if that's a British thing, let me know. If it's a Brazilian pudding thing, because Kelly's Brazilian, let me know. I don't know what a pudding sandwich is.
It just sounds very British, like toad in a hole, right? Like a pudding sandwich.
Yeah, it does.
It sounds like something they're gonna make on a Great British Bake Off.
Like
I don't.
Pasty.
Yeah, I don't know what a pudding sandwich is.
I don't know what that. Yeah, I don't know what that is.
I don't know. Also, why is that something you said out loud to a news reporter? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like she was just walking down the street and she said, "Ha ha ha! Don't get fat like a pudding." She said this to someone who wrote it down.
Right. It's a good thing she's not my girlfriend. I look like a pudding sandwich, I'm sure. So I
don't.
Probably you're fat shaming.
Yeah, and that's not okay for anybody on either side.
There you go.
Well, I'm not going to go that far because it's Max Verstappen, and I refuse to see him as a victim. But I don't know. It's not okay, and it's very weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
And I don't know what a pudding sandwich is.
I don't either. I need context, folks. I need context, and somebody's going to finally say what it is. And I'm
what are you, a wizard, a genius? Why didn't you tell me that before?
I don't know what a pudding sandwich is. Let's see. Let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
Hey, Shumi in Toronto says this. He doesn't ask, he's saying this. Our dear friend up in Toronto. He said, "Hey, Todd, I'm watching your podcast on YouTube," which I always do. Thank you. And referring to K-Mag crashing, I don't know where I heard it, but they said maybe either his tire blew on the corrugated part of the corner or his rear suspension broke just before he hit the wall. You were saying it's not like Kevin to hit a wall like that, but remember in Canada, my part of the world, he spectacularly slammed the Wall of Champions. That's true. I do. Yeah, that's right. I do remember that. And his car disintegrated, and he right down the finish stretch. Yeah, I do remember that. So, well, look, it can happen to the best of them. I totally agree. It's just not. I don't know. I think it was just how casually and nonchalantly it just kind of hit the apex, just drifted right out to the wall. I mean, it wasn't, it was just like, boy, just totally misjudged that. It just seemed weird.
It's like I meant to make a turn and I hit a button and I just kept going straight. I don't know what happened.
Because I didn't see him like hit and then have the snap oversteer or
right.
I didn't see him seesaw on the wheel trying to catch it. It just looked like he just kind of went out and veered out and glanced the wall. So I don't know. Weird. Anyway, all right. Well, that does it for this podcast. That's what we think. But you can always share your opinion and tell us what you think if you just go to theparcfermé.com and share your opinion with decorum and civility. That's the one rule we have: no personal attacks. If you like this podcast, you could do a couple things. First thing you could do is go to iTunes or your favorite podcast listener and give us a good review there, and then share the love. Send links to all your other F1 buddies who may not listen. The next thing you could do, if you really like the podcast, you could go to our website to the bottom left or top right-hand side where it says support us, and go over and join the other incredible Patreon supporters who support this podcast. And if you find a Patreon supporter, pat them on the back, because if it wasn't for them, we would not and could not do this podcast. So it is because of our amazing Patreon supporters that we do this, and I couldn't be more grateful for your support, all of you. And I really mean that. I know I say it, usually, but I really mean that. We would not do this if it wasn't for you. You are the only thing standing between us and desolation, and desperate separation from the sport you love. So anyway, thank you to our Patreon supporters. And guess, gosh, we're going to be back. Grace is going to be back next week. We're going to be talking about whatever news we're talking about.
Whatever Stefano Domenicali's got this week for us,
Hey,
right?
Look, guys, I got gold medals and sprinklers right here. I got these sprinklers. We're going to be
I was at the MotoGP race, and I thought, what about this thing?
Yeah. I thought, why couldn't they just ride on top of the car?
Right. They could lean. Then they would be like those sidecar motorcycle racing, which is by far literally the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Crazy.
That's crazy. But yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be back talking about all that good stuff. And until that time, when we do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long, Grace.
See you next week.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.